She walked in like she still owned the place. No apology, no explanation, just a smirk. That kind of smirk that isn't meant to provoke. No, it's meant to test. See how far she could push before something cracked. Before he cracked. Gary sat at the kitchen table in his worn flannel, eating Tuesday's stew like it was any other night. Spoon to mouth. Chew, swallow, chew again. His gaze didn't lift when the door creaked open at 10:04 p.m. Denise tossed her keys into the ceramic bowl near the door like she always did, with that practiced flick of her wrist, the sound echoing louder than it needed to in the quiet house. The heels came off next, with a relieved sigh and the thud of leather against hardwood. She stood there for a moment, watching him eat. Then it came, soft and smug. Had a one-night thing, would happily repeat. He didn't look up, didn't blink, just brought the spoon to his lips, let the stew slide down, then calmly set the bowl aside. Her smile faltered, not completely, but enough to betray the tiniest hint of surprise. She expected a show, a man to rage, to cry, to slam the table and demand, "How could you?" But Gary rinsed his bowl, placed it on the drying rack, turned to her with the same stoic look he used when the lawnmower died last summer and he rebuilt the carburetor by hand. "Not tonight," he said, wiping his hands on a dish towel. She gave a half laugh. "Wow, no fight left in you at all, huh?" He didn't respond, just walked past her, the scent of whatever cologne she'd bathed in clinging to his nose like cheap paint thinner. He didn't flinch. He memorized it. By midnight, he was in the garage. The metal cabinet behind his old fishing gear hadn't been touched in nearly 2 decades. He kept it locked, not because it held anything valuable, but because it held what was buried. Dust-covered photo albums, a rusted Zippo lighter, his dad's pipe, even though he never smoked, and beneath them all, a plain gray shoebox taped shut with a label in his own handwriting, FB. He peeled the tape, his hand surprisingly steady. Inside, the past, and not the good kind. A photo, faded and grainy, Denise, 20-something, sitting in a Chevy Nova, her hand draped across the shoulders of a man Gary had never met in person, but had seen once in an old newspaper clipping. The name floated up from the back of his mind like sediment disturbed in a still pond. Frank Barlow, her first serious boyfriend, the one she always dismissed as high school trash, the one who, according to her, didn't matter. The one Gary was never allowed to ask about without getting some line like, "You're too insecure, Gary. That was before you." He opened an ancient address book. 3rd page in, under B, there he was. He sat for a while, thought about the decades that had passed, the kids, now grown and distant, the anniversaries, some of which she remembered, some of which she didn't, the birthdays where he got a card, sometimes unsigned, the Christmas where she gave him a sweater, still tagged with the outlet store sticker. He thought about her birthday last year when she got a spa weekend with her girlfriends, and he got silence for 3 days. Gary picked up his old flip phone. Still worked, still had minutes. He dialed the number, 3 rings. Then a voice, rough, tired, and unmistakably alive. "Yeah?" the man answered. "This is Gary, Denise's husband. I think we need to talk." There was a long pause, the kind that felt less like hesitation and more like a clock winding backward. Then Frank said, "About time." And that was when Gary knew. Whatever he thought this was, it went deeper, wider, older. He looked back at the garage door, the quiet house, the fridge humming, the porch light still on. She wanted him to break. He wasn't going to give her that. He'd give her clarity. And if you've stuck with the story this far, just know over 97% of people listen to stories like this without subscribing. But every time you do hit that button, it gives our team the fuel to keep digging into these tales. So if you're still here, thank you. And now, let's keep going. Gary opened a drawer in the workbench, pulled out a fresh notepad, started writing. A name, a date, a few questions. The ignition had been quiet, but it had lit. Gary wasn't a man given to nostalgia. His fingers didn't tremble at old photographs. He didn't linger on the scent of perfume and fading letters, or play mixtapes like some weepy romantic clinging to college memories. But when he lifted that envelope marked FB from the shoebox, even he had to pause, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something he'd suspected for 38 years and was never allowed to ask. He peeled the envelope open with the calmness of a man tightening a vise. Inside, a photograph, creased in the center from years of folding. Denise, no more than 22, with wind-blown hair and that same damn grin she wore last night, like she knew something no one else did. Beside her, a man leaning against a car hood, arms slung lazily around her waist, sunglasses hanging from the front of his shirt. Confident, comfortable, like he was the one who got to keep her. Gary didn't recognize him, not fully, but the car, Chevy Nova, mint green with a dent on the rear panel, that jogged something. And then the memory. One night, early in the marriage, Gary and Denise had gotten into a rare fight. He couldn't remember what started it, something about a missed dinner or forgotten call. She'd snapped, "You're just like Frank, always assuming the worst," then clammed up, refused to elaborate. For years afterward, any time his name came up, it was always with an eye roll. Frank Barlow? Please, total loser, let it go. Funny thing is, he never brought Frank up again, but she kept saying that. So Gary opened the second flap of the envelope and found a torn page from a ledger book. Handwritten numbers. A check number. $10,000. His breath didn't hitch, but he stared longer than he meant to. The from line, Denise C. Hensley. The to, Frank Barlow. The date, 1989. 3 years after they were married. 1 year after their second miscarriage. Gary leaned back against the workbench, elbows resting on the cool metal, and closed his eyes. 10 grand. Back then, that was nearly a year's pay for him. It certainly wasn't nothing, and it sure as hell wasn't forgotten. He opened the old brown address book, one of those vinyl-covered ones with bent rings and alphabetical tabs fraying at the edge. Under B, about halfway down the page, he saw it. Barlow, F, 302-917-7652. No address, just a number in faded blue ink. He picked up the landline on the garage wall. Still worked. Still had that low dial tone like a whisper through a closed door. He pressed the numbers slowly. 3 rings, then 4, then a click. "Yeah?" came the voice. Deep, gravel-stained. A smoker's voice. Or someone who'd shouted too long and too often. Gary didn't hesitate. "This is Gary, Denise's husband." Pause. "I think we need to talk." Another pause. But this one, not hesitant, not confused. It was the pause of a man checking for witnesses. Then, about time. Gary could practically hear the smirk on the other end. But this one wasn't cruel. It was resigned. Like they'd both been waiting for a shoe to drop and just didn't know which one of them was holding it. They agreed to meet. A diner halfway between their towns. 11 a.m. sharp. Gary didn't ask for details on the phone. And Frank didn't offer. Because men like them didn't small talk about the women who cracked them open and planted secrets in the cavity. Gary returned to the house. Denise was asleep, her mouth slightly open, drooling onto the pillow she used to share. He watched her for a long minute. Thought about all the birthday parties she left early, the dinners she canceled for work stuff, the 4 missed anniversaries, the business trip to Nashville that suddenly became a girls' retreat in Florida, the 2 weeks she stayed at her sister's when his brother died because grief makes you clingy. His mind wasn't racing, it was organizing. And for the first time in years, something started forming. Not a plan, not yet, just a map. And at the center of it, Denise wasn't the victim. She was the blind spot. And he was done blinking. The diner hadn't changed since 1982. Same cracked leather booths, same sticky Formica tables, same faded sun-bleached menu taped to the wall above the register. Gary showed up 10 minutes early. He always did. Military habit. He sat in a corner booth with his back to the window, not because he was paranoid, but because he liked seeing who came in before they saw him. Frank walked in like a man who used to fight for a living and had stopped losing a long time ago. Worn jeans, steel-toe boots, gray hair pulled back in a rough ponytail, and a manila folder tucked under one arm like it held either a lawsuit or a death certificate. No handshake, no smile, just a nod and a quiet, "Gary?" Gary nodded back. "Frank." They didn't order anything, not at first. Just coffee. The waitress, too young to be awake, filled their cups and left them alone. Frank slid the folder across the table without a word. Gary opened it. Letters. 10, maybe 12. All handwritten in the loopy cursive Denise used back before everything was typed and filtered and emojied into oblivion. The oldest one dated back to 1984. The most recent, 91. That was the one that stopped Gary's breath just long enough to feel something shift. It opened with, I don't expect you to answer this, but I need someone who remembers who I was before I became someone's wife. It wasn't a love letter, not exactly. It was worse. It was intimate in the way only self-pity can be when weaponized. She called Gary steady but simple, said their life felt routine to the point of suffocation, claimed she missed the freedom of not explaining herself, and worst of all, asked Frank to consider helping her start over. Gary didn't flinch. He read the entire thing, sipped his coffee, and moved on to the next page. It was a bank record, $10,000, transferred from their joint account, his income from those grueling double shifts at the shop, to an account under Frank's name. Frank raised his hand. Never cashed it. You'll see. I didn't even touch it. Bank closed the account after it sat too long. I just wanted closure. She showed up once, middle of the night, said she couldn't breathe in your house, that she'd made a mistake. Gary blinked once. She say what kind? Frank shook his head. Didn't ask, figured it wasn't about me. That kind of desperation's never about who's across from you. It's about who they're running from. Gary stared at the pages again. The sloppy signature. The date, 1981. 3 years after they lost their second child. Right around the time Denise had gone to care for her aunt in Delaware for 2 weeks. She came back thin, tan, and cagey, said she needed a reset. He hadn't questioned it. She'd reset all right. Frank leaned back, arms folded. You want me to testify or something? No, Gary said. I just wanted to know if I was crazy. You're not. Gary closed the folder, slid it back. Keep it. You sure? Gary nodded. I don't need evidence. I need clarity. Frank watched him carefully, like a man measuring another man's temperature by the stillness of his hands. You don't seem angry. I'm not, Gary said, finishing his coffee. I'm focused. A silence hung between them, comfortable only to men who have spent lifetimes bottling things. Then Frank said something that made Gary pause mid-reach for his wallet. She told me once, Gary's too calm. He'll never leave. He doesn't know how. Gary stared at the check, left cash on the table, and stood up. Tell her, Frank added as Gary reached the door. Whatever she thinks she's gotten away with, she hasn't. Gary didn't look back. He didn't have to, because Frank Barlow, the ghost from her past, wasn't a threat. He was a mirror. And Gary had finally decided to stop pretending he didn't see what was looking back. Gary got home before noon. The house was silent. No hum of a dryer, no television echoing game shows Denise pretended not to enjoy, just the subtle creak of a house built on top of too many years of silence. He passed the living room and paused by the hallway mirror. The face staring back wasn't furious. It wasn't heartbroken. It looked interested, like a man inspecting a machine with a new noise. Something off in the timing. And now he was going to find out exactly which bolt had loosened and how far back the corrosion went. He carried a mug of coffee to the den and powered up the shared laptop. A thick layer of dust coated the top. Denise had switched to her tablet months ago, claiming it was easier for recipes and Facebook arguments. But Gary knew better. She'd kept the old laptop just in case. And Gary? He'd kept track of every single login. Admin password still worked. He opened the browser. History? Clean, too clean, rookie move. He opened the settings menu, scrolled to the profiles tab, and there it was. A secondary email synced to the system. Not her usual name, not even close. Just a vague username followed by a string of numbers, like it was built for throwaway messages and deniability. He logged in, password hint. My beach. Gary typed Tamarind 6, their honeymoon spot. Of course. He was in. Inbox empty. Trash. 8 messages. Deleted but not destroyed. He hit recover all. It took 30 seconds for the inbox to flood like a crime scene lit by floodlights. The subject lines alone were enough to confirm it wasn't just a one-night thing. Most weren't even about intimacy. That would have been too easy. No, these were intimate. Dozens of men over the years, some short-lived, others disturbingly emotional. One message had a subject line that read, "Wish I could wake up next to you instead of him." Gary opened that one. It was from 3 months ago, and it wasn't some stranger. It was from Lewis Chamberlain. The guy 2 doors down, local attorney, widower, always waved too enthusiastically at Denise during her evening walks. The messages were clever, coded references to client meetings and property consultations, but the hotel receipts Gary found in the attachments weren't coded at all. Downtown boutique hotel, same suite, 3 different weekends, booked under her card. And in one message, dated just last week, Lewis wrote, "It's time. You deserve better than a ghost who only speaks in chores." Gary sat back in the chair, let it all settle, like dust in a sunbeam. This wasn't infidelity, it was a program, a full-time job and betrayal. The emotion wasn't rage, it was recognition. She didn't slip. She designed her escape plan years ago. The one-night stand she'd smugly confessed was nothing more than her victory lap. The final blow she expected him to absorb with a sigh and a shrug. He plugged in a USB, opened a folder, dragged everything into it, emails, photos, hotel confirmations, even a spreadsheet she'd made budgeting potential exit scenarios. She'd mapped out divorce strategies and exit costs, compared what she'd get if she left him now versus 5 years ago. There were even notes on Gary's pension schedule. He labeled the USB Truth, not because he planned to throw it in her face, but because he wanted her to know he knew. And when it dropped, it would drop with precision. He opened their credit card dashboard, password saved. 3 recent charges stood out. Delphine Spain Suites, room 8114, Friday through Sunday, Brasserie DuPont, dinner for 2, $176.94, Civic Theater tickets, private balcony experience, all under Lewis's name, all billed to her. Gary chuckled, not loud, not bitter. The kind of chuckle a man lets out when he realizes the cancer's not spreading. It's already everywhere. He closed the laptop, set the USB beside his keys, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel small. He felt ready. Sunlight crept across the comforter like nothing had changed. Denise stirred under the warmth, her body slack and satisfied, as if the night before had somehow refilled her ego's reservoir. She stretched long, like a cat that knows it runs the house, then glanced at the empty space beside her with mild amusement. No Gary, no confrontation, not even a cold shoulder, just absence, like she was already a widow and hadn't gotten around to mentioning it. She yawned, let the sheet fall just enough to look staged, then called out in a honeyed voice, "Coffee?" Footsteps, soft, deliberate. Gary walked in holding her favorite mug, the one with the chip on the rim she always said gave it character. Steam swirled gently from the surface. He didn't say a word. She took it with a smile. "Thank you, babe." Then noticed the tray. The mug sat next to a plain white envelope. Thick, not store-bought, handmade maybe, the kind used for memorials or courtroom summons. Her brow furrowed. "What's this?" Gary didn't answer. He just turned and walked out of the room. Not fast, not angry. Like a man crossing a street he'd memorized every crack in. Denise hesitated, one hand on the blanket, the other on the envelope. Her confidence flickered, not extinguished yet, but nudged. She opened it. Inside were 4 items. A printed photo, her and Lewis, in profile, on a hotel bed, her hand on his chest. The kind of moment people only capture when they think they're the only ones breathing. A stack of printed emails, color-coded, highlighted sections with timestamps. Some included calendar invites, Google Maps links, each thread like a slow drip down a sink pipe, harmless at first glance, sickening when you smell the buildup. A scanned document, bank statement from 1991, $10,000 transfer to Frank Barlow, memo line, for everything. She'd forgotten about that one, or maybe she just hoped Gary had. A sticky note, neon yellow, his handwriting, tight and clean. Repeatable? Let's. For the first time in years, Denise's breath caught. She flipped through the emails, flipping faster, desperate to find something fake, a photoshopped line, a mismatch in the dates, but it was all perfect, precise, surgical. She sat very still. Gary's footsteps echoed through the hallway again, this time quieter. At the front door, she shouted, "Where are you going?" His voice came back through the walls, casual. "Out, got some errands." Wait, Gary, what is this? She asked, standing now, envelope in hand, her robe flapping open as she rounded the corner to the hall. He was slipping on his jacket. He didn't turn around. Make sure you read it all. She opened her mouth to say something, maybe argue, maybe soften, but the door closed before she formed the sentence. She stood barefoot on the hardwood floor, winded from nothing, with her past in one hand and her morning coffee going cold in the other. The tray still sat neatly on the bed, same place she used to leave Father's Day cards with "You're the best" scrawled across them. Except now the message was different. Now the note didn't say "You're forgiven." It said, "Your game is over." And she had no idea what move was next. Margaret's porch still smelled like geraniums and mothballs. Same chipped white rocker by the window. Same wind chime that never quite matched its own tune. Gary hadn't been here in months. Not since the last Thanksgiving, when Denise faked a headache just long enough to disappear for 3 hours with an old coworker passing through town. Margaret had smiled politely through it all, but her eyes had flicked toward the clock 3 times too many. He didn't call ahead, just parked across the street and walked up the drive with the manila folder tucked under one arm like it was a casserole dish he didn't plan on leaving. She opened the door halfway, blinking into the afternoon sun. "Gary?" He nodded. "Mind if I come in?" She didn't ask questions, just stepped aside. The living room was quiet, old, heavy with framed photos from a time when everyone had hair and smiles that weren't faked for social media. Denise, age 6, front row of a ballet recital. Denise, college graduation, arm slung around a boy Gary had never liked. He handed Margaret the folder without a word. She sat down slowly, placed it on the coffee table like it might leak something. The silence as she opened it was thick. Paper rustled. Her eyes scanned lines she probably already suspected existed. When she reached the photo, the hotel one, her lips tightened. "I warned her," she said quietly, flipping to the next page. "When she cheated the first time, before she even met you, I told her this kind of thing catches up, that one day she'd end up married to someone she couldn't afford to lie to." Gary didn't flinch. He didn't need her confession. "She always said you'd never leave," Margaret added, not quite meeting his gaze. "Said you were too calm, that you'd fold because you didn't want conflict." Gary looked around the room, spotted the ceramic ashtray on the mantel. Margaret hadn't smoked in 20 years, but she'd never moved it, like part of her knew she might need it again. "She was right," he said finally. Margaret's eyes lifted. "Was?" He nodded once. "I stayed. Through all of it. For the kids. For the house. For the quiet. I swallowed things she thought I never saw." She closed the folder. "And now?" Gary met her eyes. "Now I'm just done." She didn't try to stop him. Didn't play the mother-in-law script. No pleading, no marriage is hard monologue. She looked at the envelope, then back at him. "She doesn't know what you've kept quiet about." Gary's jaw clenched, not from anger, from restraint. "No," he said, "she doesn't." Margaret leaned back in the chair. "Is it bad?" Gary gave a half smile. "It's accurate." They sat in silence for a while. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A delivery truck hissed to a stop. "She's not going to handle this well," Margaret finally whispered. "I'm not doing it for her to handle," Gary replied. "I'm doing it so I can look in a mirror again without wondering why I let someone spit on loyalty and call it marriage." Margaret rubbed her temples. "I always hoped she'd grow out of it, that something in her would settle, but it's like she kept trying to audition for a life where the husband was just scenery." Gary stood. "I didn't come for permission," he said. "Just thought you deserved to know. I won't humiliate her publicly, not unless she forces my hand. But this isn't salvageable." Margaret didn't argue. She just nodded. "She always thought silence meant weakness," she murmured. Gary walked to the door. "No, it meant patience." He opened it, stepped into the cool air, and paused on the porch. Margaret's voice followed him. "She thinks you're still figuring out what to do." He looked over his shoulder. "I already did," he said. Then he walked to the car, slow, steady, like a man with nothing left to prove, while behind him, the only person in Denise's life who might have warned her again was already too tired to try. The kitchen smelled like roast chicken and rosemary, not a special meal, but intentional, something Denise would associate with comfort, with forgiveness. Gary had learned long ago that food carried memory better than words ever could. He set the table neatly. 3 plates, cloth napkins, the good wine glasses, a flickering candle in the center. He even turned on the little jazz radio station she used to hum along to before she stopped noticing music altogether. At 6:30, Denise came down wearing the navy blouse he always said looked elegant on her. Not sexy, elegant. She didn't seem tense, just curious, hopeful maybe. Her eyes scanned the table, lips twitching with a faint smile. No takeout containers? I'm impressed. Gary shrugged, brushing past her as he checked the oven. Told you, home cooked. Just us. She sat at her usual spot, one leg crossed over the other like it was a stage cue. He poured her wine without a word. She swirled it, sniffed, gave him a look like maybe this could be salvaged with the right blend of denial and charm. Then, at exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Her glass stopped midair. She glanced at Gary. Are we expecting someone? He didn't respond, just walked to the door and opened it wide. Louis stood on the stoop, awkward in a gray blazer and jeans, holding nothing but a briefcase and a very confused expression. Evening, Louis, Gary said pleasantly, stepping aside. Thanks for coming. Denise stood abruptly. What's this? Louis blinked. You invited me to... Wait, what's going on? Gary gestured toward the table. Dinner. I figured it'd be rude not to break bread before I send the file to the Bar Association. Always preferred face-to-face before paperwork. Denise's face drained. Gary walked to the wine bottle, refilled his glass, and then calmly poured one for Louis, who hadn't yet moved from the threshold. Please, Gary said to him. Sit, eat. You've already tasted the best parts of this house, haven't you? Louis's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Gary slid a chair back from the table. I even made dessert, peach cobbler. Your favorite, I hear. Denise's voice finally cracked. Gary, what are you doing? He didn't even look at her. I'm hosting, he said. You like entertaining, don't you? So here we are, entertained. Louis took a tentative step inside, suddenly aware of how loudly his shoes sounded on the hardwood. Gary set the final plate. 3 forks, 3 knives, 1 truth. He sat. They didn't. Gary leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. I thought about screaming, he said to no one in particular, throwing things, leaving a note like in the movies. But then I remembered this house has always been quiet. So I figured, why not let the collapse be quiet too? Denise tried to speak, but Gary raised a finger. No need to explain. Really, I read everything, the emails, the hotel receipts, the messages about my pension. He glanced at Louis. Ballsy move, by the way. Seducing a married woman in the same neighborhood where you coach kids soccer. Louis winced. I didn't mean for it to happen, Gary finished. Of course not. Nobody ever means for rot to set in. It just does. He picked up his fork, cut into the chicken, and took a bite. Anyway, he said with a full mouth, enjoy. Last dinner in this house for at least 2 of us. Denise stood frozen. Her mask, the practiced poise, the flirty confidence, it cracked around the edges like porcelain left in the freezer. Gary kept eating. The clock ticked loud in the silence. Louis finally stepped back. I should go. Gary nodded. Probably best. Denise didn't move. Couldn't. Gary looked up at her once more. No speeches tonight, Dee. Just taste what betrayal looks like when it's plated and still warm. She opened her mouth to fire something back, but nothing came out. For the first time in her life, she was speechless. And Gary, he was just getting started. Gary reached into the drawer of the sideboard, 3rd one down, where the holiday napkins used to be, and pulled out a small matte black flash drive. No label. No markings. Just sleek and ominous, like something that didn't belong in a kitchen, but had every right to be there. He set it gently on the table between the wine glasses, next to the plate Louis hadn't touched. There's a copy with a reporter, Gary said, tone still calm, still maddeningly even, just in case. Louis straightened like he'd been shocked. You can't, this is blackmail. Gary raised his eyes, finally meeting his gaze. No, Louis, blackmail would require me asking for something in return. I'm not asking. Denise hadn't sat. She hovered behind her chair, one hand gripping the backrest like it might anchor her to the life she thought she still controlled. Her lipstick had faded, and a bead of sweat traced down her temple. Her wine sat untouched. Gary turned to her now, and for the first time all night, there was something under the surface. Heat, not rage, not hurt, something colder than both, the burn of precision. I never cheated, he said, never lied, not once, not about where I was, who I spoke to, how I spent our money. You want to know how rare that is? Ask around. You'll see what kind of man you gambled against. He pushed his chair back slowly, stood, and opened a leather folder that had been resting quietly under the table. From it, he pulled out a stack of legal papers. Thick, official, signed. He slid them across the table like a dealer ending the last hand of the night. You'll want to sign these tonight, he said. Timing matters for what comes next. Denise finally found her voice, but it came out brittle. You're really going to destroy everything over one mistake? One? Gary said, almost laughing. I could have forgiven one. Hell, I wanted to forgive one, but this... He gestured to the flash drive. This is a network, a portfolio. You've been busier than a real estate agent during a housing bubble. I'm just closing escrow. Lewis took a step back. Look, I didn't know. She said you were... Gary cut him off without looking. She says a lot of things. Then to Denise, you remember saying it was a one-night thing? That smirk? That proud little roll of the eyes like I was supposed to thank you for your honesty? He leaned in just slightly. Turns out, it's going to cost you everything. Her hand twitched toward the documents. She didn't pick them up. Gary tilted his head. You can stall, lawyer up, pretend shock, but you know as well as I do this was premeditated. And unfortunately for you, I document everything. Dates, purchases, email headers, transaction logs. He looked down at the forms. This divorce isn't just happening. It's landing. With teeth. She sank slowly into the chair, the fabric creaking beneath her. I gave you 38 years, he said quietly. What you gave me back wasn't even real. But I'm real now, and I'm not asking for closure. I'm issuing it. The only sound was the soft tick of the wall clock and the clink of Lewis's belt buckle as he backed toward the door, eyes darting between the two of them. I should go, he muttered. Gary nodded. I already told you that. Lewis turned and left. No door slam. Just silence. Denise looked down at the papers, then up at her husband. No trace of the man she'd once called boring, predictable, safe. That man was gone. Gary turned, walked to the hallway, and paused at the edge. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, he said. Not as a courtesy, but as logistics. You've got until morning to decide how loud this ends. And then he was gone. No slammed doors. Just the chair across from her. Empty. The wine. Unpoured. And the future compressed into 32 pages of legal ink waiting for her trembling hand. Denise woke up alone, and for the first time, it actually registered. No coffee, no creak of floorboards, no scent of eggs or toast or whatever ritual Gary used to start the morning like a metronome keeping time in a life she thought was hers, to pause and play at will. She rolled over and reached for her phone. 27 emails, half from her gym, 3 flagged urgent, 1 from a joint account notification. She skipped them all and went straight to the bank app. She entered her credentials. Access denied. She tried again, slower. Access denied. Her brow furrowed. She sat up, blankets pooling around her waist, the knot in her chest finally pulling taut. She opened a browser, navigated to the account manually, clicked, forgot password, and entered her email. The system responded. This user is no longer authorized on this account. She stared at the screen, blinked, and in that silence the real noise began. Phone rang. She answered reflexively. Hello? It was her gym's manager, polite but firm. Hi, Denise. We just wanted to confirm your cancellation went through this morning. If you change your mind, we're happy to offer you a prorated... What? I didn't cancel anything. It came through from the primary card holder, said it was part of household changes. We're legally required to... She hung up. Second call, instant. Lewis. His voice was barely above a whisper. What the hell did you give him? She stood slowly. What are you talking about? My firm. He sent everything. To the managing partner. The screenshots. The hotel invoices. The emails. Jesus, Denise, the photo. She felt her stomach flip. I'm suspended pending ethics review. If I lose my license... She hung up again. The next call came within seconds. Don't come here. Her mother. Cold. Flat. Denise's mouth opened. Mom, I told you when you were 22 to stop playing with matches. You never listened. Now you lit the whole damn house on fire and want me to pretend it's a candle. I need somewhere to think. Just a few days. You can think in your car. I won't lie for you. Click. No voicemail this time. Her hands trembled now, not dramatically, just enough that the phone nearly slipped when the final notification came in. One text. From Gary. Check the safe. She stood still for a beat. Then she moved. Down the hall, past the photos she used to insist on posing for, to the closet. She knelt, reached behind the shoe rack, and turned the dial. Gary had never changed the combination. He didn't need to. She opened it and found nothing inside but a single envelope. Thick. Handwritten. She didn't open it, not yet. She sat back against the wall, knees to her chest, phone still in hand, screen gone dark. She scrolled back up, to the text. Check the safe. No anger, no sarcasm, just the finality of a man who no longer needed to shout to be heard. And in that hallway, alone with a note and silence closing in from every side, Denise finally understood. Gary hadn't left. He'd erased her. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't large, just thick enough to suggest finality. Denise sat on the hallway floor, safe door hanging open behind her, morning light bleeding in from the cracked blinds. Her robe had slipped from her shoulder, but she didn't fix it. She couldn't. Her fingers worked numbly along the flap, tearing it open not like someone curious, but like someone sentenced. First, the papers. Another set of divorce filings. Not the same ones from dinner. These were newer, dated that morning, already signed, filed, executed. No space left for negotiation, no note that said we should talk. Just ink, dry and legally binding. She set them aside with trembling hands. Then the letter, written in pen, Gary's handwriting, neat, unhurried, like the kind of man who still wrote thank you notes when someone brought him soup after surgery. She read, I loved you more than you'll ever understand. You spat on it. This house is no longer yours. Neither is my silence. She read it again, not fast, not slow, just enough to feel each word settle inside her like a swallowed key. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was honest in a way Gary had never allowed himself to be out loud. All those years she'd mistaken his silence for weakness. This letter disabused her of that fantasy in 3 short lines. She felt heat rise to her eyes but refused to let it fall. Not yet. Then came the photo. She knew it the second she saw the corner. That old Polaroid from the county fair, 1986. She was wearing his denim jacket. He had one arm around her and a cotton candy stick in the other. She looked young, wild. He looked proud. It had been torn down the center, cleanly. Her half lay flat in the envelope. His half gone. She pressed her palm to her mouth and gasped, but no sound came out. Her vision blurred. And then came the sound, not from inside but from the driveway. She scrambled to her feet, letter in one hand, photo in the other, and stumbled barefoot through the hallway toward the front door. She didn't call his name, didn't scream, she just watched. Gary's car, his old dependable pickup, was already halfway down the drive, window down, arm resting on the sill. The man she'd tried to make invisible now sat tall and centered in the frame, eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel. He didn't look back. Not once. The engine hummed like a sigh. The tires cracked gravel. And then he was gone. She stood in the doorway as the dust settled behind him, still holding that half photo like it might rebuild the other side if she gripped it hard enough. But it wouldn't. Nothing would. Because this wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't revenge. Gary hadn't burned her world to make himself feel bigger. He'd simply walked out of it and sealed the door behind him so tight she'd never get in again.